Okay, this is The Grass is Greener on WXRW 104.1 FM in Milwaukee. I am the host of the program, Gary Grass. With me is my co-host, Babette Grunel.
Hi, and today we have two student activists from the SDS, the Students for a Democratic Society, Adari Tamayo and Caleb Patterson. They'll be talking about, I think kind of the repression of the UWM campuses on student activists. So,
Yeah, thank you for having us on. As Babette said, we've been facing repression, ever since the student movement really took an upturn about a year ago. Really came out in support of Palestine, and over the last couple of months, after we had some militant actions that yield positive results, not just in regard to advancing our demands as also growing the movement on campus. The university has attempted to punish us and repress us to shut this movement out. But yeah, you have anything to say, Caleb?
No, yeah, just pretty much that. It's been ramped up ever since really like a year ago, almost exactly now. Starting with, our sit-in, I think they really started to have eyes on us following that February 9th sit-in, and then from there the encampment, and now even though we are not, pushing for any of those, well, not currently, we're not doing any of those big actions, but there's still, eyes on us like a hawk, even when we try to flyer around campus, just trying to get the word out at the very least. They're going to have cops on us at all moments, really, as we
you
do things
mentioned
around
the
campus.
sit-in. When was that, and were you sitting in? Was it at the chancellor's office or some other place?
Yeah, that was in February, February 9th of this year. We sat right outside the chancellor's office for just over 6 hours, and we were demanding a meeting with him. We demanded a meeting within 2 weeks after the chancellor had evaded us for about 6 months at that point, and very just literally running from us, and whenever they saw us on campus. Um, and so we demanded that meeting within 2 weeks. They told us that they couldn't schedule anything for until April and even until the summer. That's what they told us back in February. So we demanded that meeting within 2 weeks to go over the demands, and we ended up getting that meeting, but also five of us ended up getting arrested as a result of the actions that day. So yeah, since then, I think the repression, they went mask off. That's when they began to punish students openly for being pro-Palestine, and they haven't really let their foot off the brake since then. But nonetheless, SDS, though they're organizations of the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee Popular University for Palestine Coalition. Despite all this repression, we're still here.
When you say they punish you for being pro-Palestine, can you tell us what the actual charges were that they were making, and why that is to you clearly punishing you for being pro-Palestine?
Yeah, I think the official charges they gave us, both disciplinary actions as well as pursuing legal action through the state, was prohibited noise. This is coming from the sit-in specifically. Prohibited noise, prohibited signs, and then unlawful assembly and occupation. So even as far as our signs and our chants being prohibited, we were too loud. Our signs, they in some way, shape, or form they were prohibited. Um, that these are the things that they say officially. But then when you look at when basically every other student group has the same type of signs, or chants just as loudly. It's only when we chant free Palestine that it becomes a problem. It's only when we officially, what they ended up the legal case ended up being was that we stayed in the building after it had officially closed. But they're not arresting students because they stay in the library a little bit longer, or any other academic building. But when we stay in there demanding a meeting with our chancellor, when we're in there chanting free Palestine, that's when it becomes a problem.
I wanted to ask because, I mean, we've talked several times already, and the last time we talked was right after the encampments outside Mitchell Hall had ended, and there was an agreement with the university. And part of that agreement was that there would not be disciplinary action coming out of those encampments. And so, can you give us an update as what happened since then? Because I understand there's been disciplinary action since those encampments, and that sounds like it would be violating the agreement, but maybe it isn't. So, why don't you kind of bring us forward from that point?
Sure. Yeah, I think the agreement that we came out of with from the encampment was that no students that took part of the encampment would face disciplinary actions as a result of the encampment, and that's remained true. Despite the fact that the university sent an email almost every day saying that the encampment was illegal, if you're participating in these, you're liable to face disciplinary and legal, action. Despite the UW systems president Jay Rothman condemning our encampment as illegal. And despite even, Governor Evers, declaring a so-called no encampment zone, and we came out of the encampment with no legal repercussions from the encampment itself. But of course, that the encampment wasn't the end of our actions. So, soon after on June 6th at a Board of Regents meeting, at a finance during the finance committee report, the coalition took part in a protest, and Kayla here was actually a part of the group of students that was arrested, so I can let them speak more on that.
Yeah, sure. Really what we were trying to do, the statement that we were reading was just reminding the Board of Regents and the Chancellor Monet, because it was the Board of Regents meeting was on our campus at UW Milwaukee. And
Yeah.
so
No, they rotate around the different campuses every month.
right, correct. Yeah. So we saw this as like an opportunity to just, remind them that these issues should really be on their meeting agendas, that they should still be very relevant to them given like the very recent agreement. So we went in there and we stood up and addressed the Board of Regents, really just trying to remind them of the ongoing genocide, scholasticide specifically, and how pertinent it is for us as students that we, divest and accordingly with the ongoing genocide. Um, and for that, they immediately, descended on us. They had cops from all over the UW system, which was really interesting. Is it was like I think honestly after that, like shortly after that, we had heard, somebody told us that like somebody had called it actually into the UW Student Union and said like SDS is planning an event for this day, like be aware. And I think the police took that as an excuse to really just like go full military. I don't know. They had riot gear when after they detained us. We noticed in the rooms like full on like helmets and all kinds of things.
That
I don't know
really
what
sounds overboard.
yeah, yeah. They really do have a habit of going overboard. I mean, back in the sit-in, they had like 12 different precincts from like around southeastern Milwaukee, Wisconsin coming around. I don't know what they were planning with that either. But
We remember seeing like I don't know a couple of dozen uh police vehicles in back of another building near campus.
yeah, it was such a strange thing to witness for us, and it was really like a kind of a call for us to start looking into like more better security measures as this kind of repression starts to ramp up. Um, but sorry, I'm also losing my point. The Board of Regents meeting, yeah, we went in there and not even like a minute even into our statement did they come and detain us. Just recently though, after getting those that legal action like brought to us, we took it to court. We've been in and out of court. Just recently this week, we did beat the charges though of disorderly conduct. Luckily, we had a deal of doing community service to get the charges dismissed. So we saw that as a win, and just kind of reaffirming that at the end of the day, like this kind of repression doesn't really stand in the court, let alone in the community. The community was very outraged. We had a lot of support coming out of it after people saw the videos of us being detained from that action.
Is that I assume that type of resolution is like it's like a hold open where you have to stay out of trouble during the course of the for a period of time, and then they drop it off the records. Is that what you got?
Yeah, I mean it's similar to that. What just a couple days ago, they were required to do a couple hours community service, which they completed within their allotted time, and the case was dismissed. But I'm sure you know unfortunately it probably won't be the last time we end up in court, just because um you know, the not just the state, but the school is constantly targeting um, the pro-Palestine movement and targeting SDS in particular. On the first week of school, during the club fair, there was a couple of our members there just flyering. Some people had an SDS shirt on, some didn't. But just by the simple fact of being SDS members, the university tried to use that as an excuse to kick to kick people off campus. But of course, they have no basis to do that. People have a right to be on campus as students, as, members of the community. So we ended up just, shrugging that off. But, they are going really extreme. Whenever we have an action, they'll have riot police. Even when we're, flying on campus, they'll call security and, campus police on us just to keep an eye out.
Why
So
why
yeah.
would why would why would just identifying with the SDS become an issue? I mean, isn't that a registered student organization? I mean, it's not like a listed terrorist group or anything.
You think it is, but unfortunately, we're not a registered student org. After there was the action at the Board of Regents in June 6th, and then about a month later came the International Court of Justice ruling that said that Israel is in fact in violation of international law, and they have illegal settlements. I don't remember the exact wording in that that ruling from July, but it did declare that that in fact Israel does have illegal settlements and that they must you know remove them as rapidly as possible. Um, so the coalition page, of
And
which
all
SDS
Israel
is a
heard was
member of.
remove as rapidly as possible.
Yeah, exactly. So no, so like I said, the coalition Instagram page, of which SDS is a member of, made a statement, posted a statement on the story, which is deleted after 24 hours automatically, but just reaffirming that case and saying that we're going to be taking action on campus accordingly. And man, we also said stay tuned. And after we used those words, the university launched an investigation against all five of the student organizations that are members of the coalition and suspended us immediately. Um, and as you might have heard, those suspensions were lifted, those interim suspensions were lifted. However, because SDS was seen as kind of the leader of a lot of these actions, including the sit-in, including the Board of Regents action. We were suspended for 2 years. And once these interim suspensions were lifted, the suspension was cut in half to only 1 year. But we are on probation for a year after that. So SDS is suspended until 2025 and on probation until 2026.
The last I understood, there was a student organization disciplinary review committee that was listed in the student handbook as part of official policy to provide legal due process to student organizations so they couldn't just be suspended or put on probation willy-nilly. Did you get any sort of due process in that?
No, none at all. Even from the interim suspension that was done immediately. No due process at all. They didn't even try to get our side of the story. Before they essentially slandered us in their emails that they sent out to the school, calling us anti-Semitic, calling us a threat to safety on campus. Despite the fact that when the investigation concluded, for whether we were in violation of civil rights, believe it or not, that was the investigation. In the letter they sent to us, they said, we find you in no way in violation of the Civil Rights Act. We don't this is anti-Semitic. And then 5 minutes later, they send a mass email saying, while the investigation concludes otherwise, we still think that they're anti-Semitic. So, they really double down
Who's
at
putting
this.
out that letter? Who's putting out that letter?
The university, I think it usually comes from the Office of Student Affairs.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
could probably get you links to those letters, but yeah, they sent us an investigation saying that we were cleared of the charges of anti-Semitism, and then they went and sent an email saying the opposite. So, they're quite literally lying, just to make us look bad. Um, doing everything they can to smear us. But nonetheless, every time that they do smear us, people come to our page to find out the truth for themselves, and our the following has grown despite the attacks from the university.
I mean, to me, the whole thing is just seems utterly just absurd. That I mean, you're talking about this uh, being anti-Semitic is a crime, right? Which I mean, being anti-Semitic in the traditional sense is bad, but it's never been a crime to have those beliefs, right? I mean, this is a university; they typically tolerate freedom of expression, even if it's bad expression. And then, of course, nowadays they're defining anti-Semitism as like opposing anything Israel does. It now becomes quote unquote anti-Semitic, which is absurd, but that's the way they're defining it nowadays. And I can understand how any sort of normal, rational person would have anti-Israel ideas and want to express them. I don't see as far as I knew, back in my day, that never would have violated any rules, right? Um, they would have said, "Look, we're a university. We're for freedom of expression. We're for sifting and winnowing. We're for everything is supposed to be. This is a place for people to discuss their different views and work them out and think about things in deep ways. That we don't suppress people's thoughts or punish them for their beliefs. That's just not what a university is for. We're supposed to be the guardians of free speech, not the first place where it gets
Stamped out.
restricted." Yeah. Um, so to me, that whole thing just sounds like, I mean, I'm like utter nonsense on the part of the university. I mean, it's just unbelievable nonsense.
Yeah, you're right. It is nonsense, and to add to the nonsense, when there was Nazis on campus, with anti-Semitic slogans on signs and carrying around a swastika, they didn't do anything to those students. They didn't do anything to those people who were actively harassing Jewish students, and
When was
instead they
this?
punished. This was in 2019, I believe.
Oh my.
2019. So instead of punishing the Nazi or condemning the Nazi, what they did was punish the student who snatched the swastika flag from him and ripped it up.
Oh, I
Um,
remember that story. Yeah.
so they're quite they don't care about anti-Semitism. What they care about is are the fact that we're against Israel's actions, and they even admitted to that when they uh launched their investigation. There are quote unquote anti-Semitic phrases, whereas our criticism of Israel specifically. Um, yeah, so they're not hiding that fact. It's not that we're anti-Semitic. It's not that we're do anything against the safety of Jewish people. It's that we're questioning Israel's actions. Is that we're against the genocide going on.
Oh,
Uh,
that's
doesn't
weird.
that doesn't that create an uncomfortable campus environment though for former IDF soldiers who might have killed children and then have to walk around campus and see your signs?
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's the only thing. If IDF soldiers feel uncomfortable, so be it.
Where's your basic morality? Can't you see those are your fellow students? Oh my God. Ugh.
Yeah, no,
Um,
enough. In our demand, we say that we don't want any educational partnerships with the universities in occupied Palestine and in Israel in these in this stolen land. And the university's argument was that they support academic freedom, that they can't tell a professor or a student where they can't or can't go study. But they don't care about academic freedom when they're punishing us for questioning that fact in the first place.
it bothers me that they wouldn't show some concern for the Palestinian universities that are, being bombed to smithereens.
Right. And well, they did, show or at least feign support when we came out of the encampment. That was part of the agreement. They wrote a statement, they published that statement, sent it out. But they have since backtracked that statement, for in some, twisted world, they're allowed to walk back the fact that they acknowledge that there's a scholasticide and a genocide going on. Um, they even cited the UN. They even cited, things like Amnesty International, the International Court of Justice. But in our, the world that we live in, they've been allowed to backtrack those statements in the name of neutrality.
What type of neutrality is that particularly? Neutrality between who or what?
Yeah, exactly. There's no such thing as neutrality. It's they're not being neutral when they're punishing pro-Palestine students. and neutrality, it simply means upholding the status quo. Once you go against the status quo, you're not neutral. Um, and that's the simple reality. We're not neutral, and but neither are they. But they claim to be, in the that they only use that to silence Palestinian voices, to silence pro-Palestinian allies, instead of actually being neutral, as in theory a university is supposed to be. Like you said, it's the battleground of ideas, but they're not neutral. But they're punishing us for also not being neutral.
For expressing your ideas.
Exactly. Yeah, we're expressing our ideas. We feel that we're expressing the truth. Beyond that, we're at a university, at a institution of higher learning, where facts are supposed to reign supreme. But that hasn't been the case, very clearly over the last year.
I think there's a fundamental difference between students expressing a position through protests and signs and the types of things that you're doing, versus the government expressing its position by discriminating among different people based on their point of view. I mean, there's a fundamental difference there. I mean, the university is required to be neutral in that sense, whereas you're required to follow your conscience and not be neutral. I mean, the university only works when the players are non-neutral and the referees are neutral, and they're supposed to be the referees, and instead they're acting like players.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, they've made it clear that they're a player on the side of genocide, on the side of Israel.
So, where are things standing now? Is anyone facing, uh, being kicked out of school? Uh, are some of the groups threatened? As far as okay, the SDS is sort of suspended for a year yet. I assume that means you can't get any student funding for events you might have, things like that. Can you, get a room at the university to hold events? Um, stuff like that. Or are you just suspended from doing any of it?
We're pretty much suspended from doing any of it. We can't currently get any funds from the university. We also can't reserve rooms. Even now we are starting to see like pushback as far as like just affiliating with the university, which is an ongoing thing that we're seeking legal counsel for. As far as like, can we use the university's name just to describe the simple fact that like this is where our members are based at.
Like
And as far
SDS at UWM, something like
yeah,
that?
there's going to be some distinctions that have to be made as far as like what exactly they want us to do with our name and things. So we're still working that out. Um, and then as far as like the larger coalition, yes, these orgs have been like reinstated right now, but the amount of I don't know, the eyes on us have been very apparent. Like you can feel it whenever you're on campus now. There are like plenty of signs that they've posted up this year or this semester, excuse me. Just making sure people are aware of the protest policy suddenly, and really they'll send out, honestly, like I think it's been on like a nearly daily basis now where they'll send out like emails, like student campus wide emails, like reminding people of their protest policy and just reaffirming that civil disobedience is not protected by the law, which is just so interesting to remember. Like we have a lounge on campus named after Martin Luther King Jr., so it's just kind of crazy that they want to make this distinction but then claim to, as you said earlier, be like a
Yeah, that's
space for
quite ironic.
speech and protest. Yeah.
Yeah, civil disobedience does violate the law. I mean, that's what makes it disobedient, right? If it isn't violating the law, then it doesn't really count as being civil disobedience. You're still following all the rules. But it is kind of a bizarre thing to remind people of that. I mean, the whole point of civil disobedience is to break the rules for some positive purpose that makes it a justified and moral action to do that. But I mean, so part of the suspension is, and I've never really considered this in the past, right? I mean, I've seen student organizations get suspended before, but the university approves the organization when it first gets chartered, right? And it forces it to use this name that ends in at UWM, because you used to have all the organizations say, oh, we're the UWM Black Student Union, oh, we're the UWM this, we're the UWM that. And the university decided that associates them with the university too much, and they get to say, no, we don't want you to do that. So everything's got to be at UWM to make it clear that you're not really part of the university, even though the university recognizes and registers you and accepts you and controls you to some extent, right? So they have this kind of like really bizarre set of rules on that. And this is the first time I've really considered the fact that, well, now, even though they've chartered you and they've recognized you, that when they suspend you, part of what they suspend is being able to even use your own name for anything that you do while you're suspended. Because even though you're suspended, you still have an existence. You still have this group of people that get together that are associated under this name, and now you can't even use the name anymore, or so they claim. That, to me, that's like a very peculiar thing, and it's especially overreaching when you never got your due process in the first place, right? When they just the university. Let's start out with this. All aspects of student life up until 2015, they were supposed to be controlled by the students. The university administrators were supposed to have absolutely nothing to do with that, right? They were supposed to be, well, I won't say absolutely, but they were supposed to be secondary. The primary authority had to belong to the students, primarily through the student association, and so the Office of Student Life theoretically couldn't do any of that. 2015, they changed the law. So now the students are supposed to advise on that. But did the students advise at all? Where were the students in all of this? It seems like there's a huge overreach in terms of both due process and in terms of shared governance. It's just wrong in so many ways.
The administration seems to have taken over just about everything.
Yeah, you're right. There's no such thing as shared governance, and to add to that, with the recent mass layoffs of I believe it was 35 tenured faculty from the two campuses that shut down at Waukesha and Washington counties. The faculty and much less the students had any say in that. Even when we've had these like disciplinary procedures as SDS and as as individuals being charged by the university, we take it all the way and we take it to the disciplinary like panel where there's supposed to be a student.
It's supposed to be students. It's supposed to be a student-controlled panel. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Look, I was on the committee that wrote the rules for who is on those panels. That was bad. That was way back, decades ago, right? But they never formally changed the rules. We established that in court. They never formally changed the rule, and the rule said that, well, they didn't want to have a majority of the students, but they put a plurality of students on the committee. It was supposed to be a committee of 7 people, of whom 3 are students, right? And they've been doing this now for years, where they make sure to have 1 student so they can have quorum, right? And then they load it up with all these other people and don't ever ask any other students to attend, right? So they've reduced it informally through their process. What they say is, well, we have a committee, but it's more than 7 people. It's the real committee is like 50 people, but we only invite 7 to actually attend the meeting, and 1 of them is a student. Mm-hmm. And it's just absurd. They've totally cut out any sort of student voice or any sort of student control over those committees. And that was at least until the change in 2015, and still somewhat after that, that is supposed to be a student process. That is not supposed to be their process to which they graciously invite a student to sit in. That is supposed to be a student-run, student-dominated process under law. And the way we handled it before, the compromise with the university was to have half the committee students, half the committee non-students, and then have the chair be a faculty member or academic staff. And and last time I saw them do one of these things, the chair was like some guy who fixed their computers. It was some guy who was completely under control of the administration, that wasn't faculty, wasn't academic staff. It was just university staff. So I mean, they totally have shredded the student disciplinary process. And there is, I've actually, in terms of litigating this, I became a little bit of an expert in this, because they've followed this model now where they say, oh, well, all this due process stuff, that really belongs in the courts. This is a totally different type of proceeding. None of that stuff really applies here. The only due process they should get is like notice that there's a hearing. I mean, that's literally what they say now. This is like the thing that's going around in journals that the student disciplinary professionals get as part of their professional training, and they go to seminars and they get these journals and they all say, oh yeah, that model that's based on the criminal justice system is like totally outdated now. We do something totally different from that now. We just want to restore the students to being in good graces with the community, the university community, by showing them the error of their ways. And there really is very little room for any sort of due process. We don't really need to hear them out. I mean, hearing them out.
That's just assuming they have error of their ways. It's just assuming that they're guilty in a sense.
You're guilty until proven innocent, because the innocent until proven guilty thing, that's a very bad model. That's for criminals, but you're not criminals, you see, so you don't get that presumption.
Yeah, 100% right. It's completely undemocratic. It's completely absurd. I'd even go as far to say it's illegal that they're doing all of these things, like as you said. And I'd even say that they don't even invite students. They handpick a student that they know is going to take their side. Having been of these meetings, it's just a handpicked student. It's a handpicked panel, and even like you said, the person that's supposed to be chairing these things is getting coached by the administrator as they go through the thing.
That's true. They have a formal position of advisor, and the advisor switches off. It's the same person that's the prosecutor one week and an advisor the next week, right? And so it's like it's like basically having a person who is like in the district attorney's office sit in as the judge on your hearing, right? It is a ridiculous system that they have. And the last time I litigated one of these, the student they had actually graduated. But they kept them on the rolls just to be able to use them in these hearings, right? The person wasn't even really qualified to be there as a student. They do just pick people that are like, they're puppets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all it is. It's just a puppet government.
Wow.
I think I want to talk to the president of the Student Association one of these days, because I think he might disagree with that. But I know he's been having some struggles with the administration. I think some of these people want to do the right thing, but they're just in a very difficult position because there's so much power has been taken away from the students, and students have failed to recognize their power. And it's so they've self-censored and they've cut themselves short, and it's really sad. There needs to be some revitalization of this concept of not just student rights but student power, and the idea that there is still some shared governance left in the statutes. Not very much, but there's still some, and you could use that power, but they're not using it. It's really a shame.
There needs to be a demand for a return of shared governance.
Definitely.
Full-on demand for it. I mean, whether it's, massive student walkouts or, whatever. I mean, that needs to be an issue on campus for all the students.
It's not just student shared governance. Faculty student governance, like you're saying, has been really shredded. And one of the things I just want to throw this in really quickly. I remember decades ago there was an issue where there was there was an issue about the firing of a faculty member. And I remember this went to court, and the university legal backed up the administration 100%. And one of the faculty members' arguments was like, well, why are they taking the side of the administration? They're just as much our lawyer as the administration's lawyer, right? How come our salaries are also being used to fund their lawyers, right? And when it comes to this person that's in charge of controlling the UWM name and logo, so this SDS at UWM can't use the phrase UWM, they say, right? The person who makes that decision and the person who's the lawyer who's writing the letters or whoever it is, right? These people, they're supposed to be representing the entire university. They're not just supposed to be representing, the interests of the chancellor against other members of the university community, right? There should be some, the students are part of shared governance. They're part of running the university too. The faculty are part of shared governance. They're part of running the university too. But only one side, has legal power, and they use that to expand their authority at the expense of the other elements of the university community. And that's been a process that's going on for decades to just try to suck up all the power up into the chancellors and the regents. And it's just been really disgusting. Anyhow, that end of rant. I have a question, but I'm going to let Babette ask her a question first.
Yeah. I wanted to know where things are going now as far as the issues on on Gaza, on Lebanon, are there protests coming up and such? I mean, there's some horrific human rights violations going on, and I assume the students would be protesting that.
Yeah, definitely. We participated in last week's Hands Off Lebanon that was called by the Milwaukee Anti-War Committee, and this or tomorrow we're participating in the as part of a national and international call to action. One year of genocide, 1 year of resistance. Tomorrow, starting at Ziegler Park. Commemorating, like I said, this 1 year of genocide as well as the 1 year of resistance to this genocide.
And
And
I just want to patch in. When you say tomorrow, you're referring to Saturday, October 5th, because this
correct.
this this
Yeah.
this this show could be heard at any time, but we're recording this on the 7th, so Saturday, October 5th is when
we are recording it not on the 7th.
we're recording. We're recording this on the 4th, so yeah. So Saturday, October 5th is when this. Okay.
Yeah, good clarification. Yeah, so last week being September 25th, September 26th is when we participated in that, and then tomorrow being October 5th, we'll be at this statewide action starting at Ziegler Park.
Union Square at 301 West Michigan.
Yep, that's
2
it.
p.m.
And at 2 p.m., yeah. It'll be a massive march and rally. And then next week on campus, we're pushing for a walkout on October 9th, Wednesday, October 9th. We're calling all students, all faculty, anybody to walk out of class, cancel class if they're faculty, or just walk out of their daily lives and to join us at noon outside of the UWM campus library. That's where we'll be gathering, and then we'll be picketing on campus as well to raise our demands to cut ties with Israel.
And do you assume that that campus police will be there in force? Or
Oh, always. Yeah, they love us. I think, they whenever we have an action, they the money bags sparkle in their eyes, because they get good overtime from it.
Very good.
I did no luck getting them to arrest the chancellor for any of those violations, right?
Yeah.
I did want to mention two other things that I assume you'll be possibly a part of. On Sunday, I believe it's also at 2, but I'm not absolutely certain. If you know, please correct me. There will be a Jewish Voice for Peace event at McKinley Beach. And then on Tuesday, October 8th, there'll be a vigil at the Islamic Community Center. A vigil saying killing the flowers will never delay the spring at 7 p.m. On 815 West Layton Avenue. Obviously, that's not on campus, but it is in Milwaukee. Tuesday the 8th.
That's the ISM Community Center.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, there is a week of action. The 5th, October 5th, we'll kick it off, and then Mourn the Dead, Fight for the Living, hosted by JVP on Sunday. Then the vigil, like you said, Killing the Flowers will never delay the spring on October 8th, and then the walkout taking place on the 9th.
And that's on campus. The last one is on campus. The walkout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll start at the library, and then we'll transition into our picket.
All right. Well, I'm glad to see stuff is happening. I'm glad to see all this is going on. It can never be enough. It really can't. I mean, this is such an important defining issue, and it seems like our culture is completely obsessed right now with something that's going to happen on November 5th, and like which proponent of more and more genocide is going to get into office, and that seems to like have dominated like a lot of people's thoughts, and so it's sort of it's hard to get like the most important issues in when the secondary issues are like treated as being so important. It's a huge distraction.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's not an accident.
I mean, I don't know. It's a little bit of an accident, but I do think that we've seen a series in the past of like something going on that distracts people, like the Super Bowl, and Israel uses that as a day for massive escalation and massive war crimes. And so I guess you can expect that probably on election day, you're going to see some sort of set of atrocities that are going to be committed by Israel because people will be distracted by the vote, and that'll be a good time for them to do something really, really horrible and not get a lot of attention for it. So I guess you should start planning now for your protest on November 6th.
Yeah, definitely. And there's already coalitions being formed around the country. In DC, particularly the DC Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression and the DC chapter of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. I saw that they recently are starting a coalition to protest on election day and bring attention to the issues that matter, as we said.
And I can assume that also that there will be possibly further repression here and across the country after November 5th, while you're transitioning from one administration to the next, no matter who is the next administration, there will be some repression of those who are trying to protest. At least it's quite possible.
Yeah, yeah, and I think people on both sides of the aisle, so to speak, have spoken about or rather spoken in defense of the repression, seen across the country just recently with the Uhuru Three, which is three members of the African People's Socialist Party that were facing charges for being Russian spies, essentially, and they beat one of the two
Yeah.
charges against them. But then I believe it was Hillary Clinton that came out a few days later saying that any citizens that are found disseminating Russian propaganda should face legal action or things from that along those lines. So
Right.
That just sounds so ridiculous.
Yeah, and the case was basically, oh, you're saying things that are very similar to what the Russians are saying, and therefore, we have the right to suppress it. It's like
exactly.
it's absurd. And I mean, I when I was reading about that case, I said, hey, Scott Ritter should read these articles, right? Because these are the same types of crap that they're coming against him with. I really think we should be very wary of whatever it is that they think they can't do before the election because it would be too controversial. And once the election's over and that's out of the way, they'll feel a free hand to do all this horrible stuff. And get ready and buckle your seatbelt for November 6th and what they're going to do then, because it's not going to be good.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And I think the last year has shown us anything that the Democrats are capable of anything. We're one year in of this genocide, and to be speaking of the lesser evil, and as this genocide continues, it's a little bit absurd.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I there are many ways in which the Democrats are the lesser evil. Very clearly, there are some ways in which they're clearly not. There's a lot of downsides to having a Democrat in office because, for one thing, all the progressives suddenly decide that they can't afford to weaken their candidate who's made it into office now, so they all have to sit on their hands and not protest, and so all the progressives stay at home. And if they get away with this, right, if they can say that actively committing a genocide is the lesser evil and that we can still win even though we're actively committing a genocide, then what types of horrible new lows will they be able to still get away with 40 years from now and still be able to rely on being able to get everyone to vote for them anyway because they're the lesser evil? I mean,
how much worse can you get than genocide?
Yeah, there's got to be a red line somewhere.
Yeah, that's what I've said, because I mean I've voted for the lesser evil many times, right? But I just think there has to be a limit somewhere. I mean, if there should be massive resistance to what's going on right now in the Democratic Party, they should be saying this is just too low for us, right? You can't lesser evil us down below this point. We're not going to vote for literally what you're saying right now because, okay, you may be better on this and better on that, and maybe not quite as bad on this, not quite as bad on that, but you're still committing a genocide. You're still talking about all the free speech you want to suppress. I mean, it's like, you're taking two steps towards the Third Reich here, and it's like everyone is just marching along with it. It's just really just horrendous that you don't have a much broader resistance to this whole lesser evil thinking by this point. And the fact that you have a Democratic nominee that did not get to be the nominee through a series of primary elections that she won, but because the insiders decided it was time to switch out the candidate, and they just dictated it from top down. I mean, you're not even getting the person that you chose, right? You're just getting whatever they handed to you, and you're just going to take it. And it's like, it just sort of shows that the people who are liberals, who are in favor of the Democratic Party, as they run around town with Dick and Liz Cheney and brandish their letter from all the CEOs and former Reagan officials that all endorse them, and it's like, yay, we're the official new Republicans, and you're going to vote for us because of all of your years of voting Democrat, and we can snap our fingers and you just do whatever we say. It is just so disgusting. It's like, anyway.
I did want to know, as far as on campus, how big is the issues of the election, or is that?
I apologize for being all rants today, by the way.
Or is the election kind of a non-issue? I mean, is it a big deal? Is there campaigning on campus? Is it talked about? Or are students interested in other things?
Yeah, no, I think we always appreciate the Gary rants, but I think on campus, or broadly in the student movement, just to push back a bit, I think there is a massive resistance to this rhetoric of the lesser evil of just being shuffled to vote for Democrat no matter what. At
Good.
the DNC there was on the first day there was close to 20,000 people in the streets, and all throughout the week there was over 10,000 people almost every day. Comparing
That's
that to the
impressive.
1968 protest when there was about 10,000 people, we can say we doubled that amount. And I think as young people, we can see it on campus just talking with the average student, they you know sometimes it's seen as apathy, I don't want to vote, I don't want to engage with the political process whatsoever. But I think today people are saying, oh, no, I don't want to vote for these for the two party system. I'm not voting Democrat, I'm not voting for genocide, and I'm obviously not voting for Trump. And I think a serious debate can be had on whether the Democrats can ever win back the young vote. It's been multiple years of just getting lied to. And I think, especially for our generation, that's all we know.
Yeah,
All we know
I
is
no, I mean, it's like, they're gonna try to hold out prospects of student debt relief, but I mean, it's like, look what all they've promised, and all how little they've delivered. I mean, if you're one of the students that actually got the very limited student debt relief that was handed out there, right? And those people aren't even really students anymore. They're mostly people that are all out of the system by now and are struggling with the debt. But it doesn't really feel like there's a very strong, reliable promise from the Democrats. It's like they keep yanking these things away. And the things that they would do for students, I mean, they've done some good things in the past. They're promising some good things, but they are so unreliable. And the issues that oppose that are so much larger right now. I mean, if they were really going to like just eliminate everyone's student debt, I think they'd get a lot of students jumping on the bandwagon, because that's really important to a lot of people's lives. But if they float out some sort of vague thing that like ends up at the end of the day benefiting 1% of the students aren't going to sell their souls for that, right? It's like if you want to get people off the genocide thing and onto their own personal interests, you have to make a credible promise that you're going to actually do something for their personal interests. And for a lot of students, that just doesn't exist. So they're not even really making a good effort to tempt them into evil.
Yeah, no, you're
Another
right. I
rant.
think
Sorry.
no, they're not making any effort whatsoever. In the most recent debates, both the presidential and vice presidential debates, they're arguing over who supports Israel more. They're arguing over who's gonna militarize the border more. they're not arguing on progressive issues. They're arguing over who's more right wing than the other.
I didn't hear any promises to students this time around. I mean, I didn't hear
Right.
really any serious promises to young people. I mean, there's, I guess, for people that just want to start out and buy a house, right? They're talking about the housing issue a little bit in the vice presidential debate. Should we blame immigrants for the fact that people can't afford a house? And that's kind of a weird spin on it, but okay, well, whatever. I mean, they're going to do what they're going to do, I guess. It doesn't really feel like the youth vote is all that important to them.
No,
I did,
it doesn't. Go
I
ahead,
did,
Babette.
yeah, I did want to ask, what are the issues for you? I mean, and either of you can answer this. What are the issues that you'd like to see brought up? I mean, is
I
it
think,
anti-war or is it other issues in addition?
oh, for sure. We oppose a lot of different attacks on like bodily autonomy, whether that's for, securing like gender affirming healthcare for trans folk or, the right to abortion. Um, Police crimes we also oppose, so, trying to support, initiatives for community control of the police and um also like immigrants immigrant rights. And so like there's SDS around the country, and especially here we have our hands in a few different pots, so to speak. We don't relegate ourselves just to being opposed to US intervention in war, even though that is where our foundation is.
And like Kayla said, I think the anti-war today, being pro-Palestine, being against Israel's crimes, I think that's been a solid red line across the student movement that we're not willing to cross. Um, you know, um, and I think in a lot of ways, the Democrats have, maybe they've moved on from the young people after seeing the encampments across the country, after seeing that the student movement is really at the leading edge of all these protests, of all these rallies, saying we're not going to vote for genocide. And maybe they've accepted that fact, and they moved on. But I think in a progressive candidate, in a candidate, or that claims to support progressive policies, and being anti-war, being pro-immigrant, that's the bottom line. And with DACA, the deferred the deferred is it
Deferred action
arrival?
against children of, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's coming to an end. Um, and I think as students, we constantly interact with people who are in the US, thanks to DACA and the similar programs. And for a lot of our peers, it's been weighing heavy on their minds how the Democrats have just like done nothing the past 4 years to secure DACA or build upon it. DACA was never meant to be the solution. And for a lot of students, the fact that it's coming to an end, it's weighing heavy on their minds. So like Kayla said, SDS is multi-issue for a reason, because we're affected by multiple things, but in the end, they stem from the same rotten root of the U.S. system.
It seems like the Democratic Party is doing you a big favor and sparing you a moral dilemma by not offering most of the things that you want, so that it isn't really that difficult. They're not pulling you away from your red line because they're offering you nothing, right? They may talk a little bit, but if you look at what they've done over the last 4 years, you know, they haven't done great for immigration, right? They haven't done anything bold. They've built more of the wall. They've increased the border patrol. I mean, it's like they've hauled out anti-COVID restrictions to try to keep people from making asylum claims. They've done all these sort of horrible things, still have the kids in cages, and they haven't really fixed it. It's like they've just put a donkey face on it instead of an elephant face. And that is not a winning formula for getting you guys to like go against your principles and vote for them in spite of the genocide. I mean, it's like, I don't know if you would ever consider doing that, but it's not even a hard choice because they're not giving you anything strong to try to lure you. It's just like you can just walk right past that window and say no thanks.
So I did want to, before we end up ending, I don't know how close we are to the end here, but if people want to find out more and, attend your meetings or just find out more about this issue, where would they go? How would
Yeah, I
they get a
mean,
hold of you?
yeah, all our meetings are open to the public. We've been meeting at Zao Church. That's across from the UWM Student Union
On
at
Kenwood, right?
2319 East Kenwood Boulevard. We meet Thursdays at 6 p.m. At the upper level of Zao. And staying tuned on Instagram. Our Instagram handle shouldn't change, but will still be SDS_UWM. What UWM stands for might change a little bit, but we're still going to be based out of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, whether they like it or not.
Yeah,
Um,
okay, be careful. You might get sued by Universal Wholesale Mortgage.
yeah, someone. But no, yeah, I think Instagram, coming to our meetings, all our meetings are open, and also staying tuned on the coalition Instagram, UWM for Pali. That's PALI coalition on Instagram, as well as fightbacknews.org. That's independent newspaper that reports on our actions. Some of us write for the newspaper. Like you said, the mainstream media isn't really talking about this. We got to go on the grass is greener to learn about
That's right.
what's really going on.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll have to put all of those links on our page, underneath the description for the show. So we'll make sure to do that so that people could go to, riverwestradio.com/shows and look up our show. They can see all this attached to the episode.
all
So
right,
do
yeah,
you
thank
have
you.
do you have any last words you care to get in?
Yeah, I'll say a couple things. We talked a lot about the repression, and that's something that can't be ignored. The university is really putting their knee in the back of our necks. They really want to choke us out. They want to choke out the student movement. And while despite all these things are happening, despite we're facing disciplinary charges on campus, legal charges off campus, we have came out of these things with wins. So anybody listening, I don't want people to be discouraged. By any means. Despite the fact that the media might not be reporting on us as much as they once were, ultimately the movement is growing, and I'd say the movement is winning. But I think repression, it always ends up backfiring. It's like a rock that the university is lifting, and then they drop it on themselves. So as much as they repress us, it will never work. The more they try to repress us, the more we're gonna grow.
Well, good for you. And I have to say, being an alum of UW, it was really beautiful seeing the students doing the camp out on campus earlier this spring. Seeing that level of commitment was really, well, quite encouraging that there was a student movement.
Yeah, definitely. The student movement is back. Not just by reusing the name of organizations in the '60s, but we're really growing again. And I think students are realizing that when we take the streets, when we mobilize, we have the power to change things, not just on campus but in our communities.
And that sounds like a very good note to end on. Thank you once again for being on our show, Adari Tamayo and Kayla Patterson.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both.
Thank you.